We're not going to sit up here and pull up SynkedUP and show you how to build a budget, how to build an estimate. I don't want to do that. I want to kind of talk high level, very quickly with 3 or 4 or 5 slides, and then I really want to share. I want this group to ask questions. Who's struggling with something? Someone that solved it. Let's try to get some good conversation back and forth here. Share some knowledge, share some experiences, and just kind of get the juices flowing. So budgeting, we'll start here, is we want to talk about the why, the how, and the when. So we're your hosts. You guys, has everyone here have met with Chris? Yeah, vast majority of you, okay.
If you haven't, you should. If you're not adjusting your budget often, you run the risk of making some changes and not accounting for it, and that can create some bleeding that you may not identify until it becomes a much bigger issue. So I just want to make sure that we're all in the habit of just getting together at least twice a year. And any time in the in-between, if you've got questions, I tell you all when you onboard, right? I'm here as a resource for you. But let's make sure that we schedule some time so that we can start putting things together, put things to bed for this year, get things ready for next year, do a little housekeeping.
So yeah, between the two of us, we literally have over 70 years experience in this industry. So don't ever hesitate to reach out and pick either of our brains on anything. Chris is going to be his job every day, all day, is to meet with you about your budgets. I am happy to do that as well in between my other duties, but don't ever feel like you're bothering us if you want to just chat, even if it's not budget related. You're having a struggle with the business. You've got a hurdle you can't get over. Pretty much him and I have done almost everything there is to do in this industry. So when I had to step out of my everyday role, the budgeting and onboarding, and start doing other things, filling that budgeting job was my biggest concern because I have a real passion for it, and finding the right person to take my seat was not easy, right? You guys all, same thing out in the field. You're trying to find that guy that was gonna put pavers down as well as you do, or build the water feature as nice as you. It's a challenge, but I was very fortunate to find this guy, bring him onto the team, and he's been an invaluable asset. So why do you need a budget? We need a plan to steer the business forward. Without a budget, you are flying completely blind. You're waiting till the end of the year, and you're waiting for your accountant to say, yeah, you did well, you didn't do well, or whatever that may be. But we need that footprint, that foundation to build on. We need to know when we're on the right track and when we're veering into troubled waters. We need to understand the business costs so that you can charge correctly. And then, dare I say, budgeting can be actually a little bit fun. Like, it shouldn't be this big trepidation, scary thing. It should be forward thinking, imagining, dreaming, planning for what you want to be, where you want to go with your business. So have fun with it and dive right in. You want anything to add?
I don't think so. I kind of balked a little bit when he said budgeting can be fun, but he's not wrong. You know, and it was a lot less fun before SynkedUP, and many of you onboarded when we still had the old budget form, right? That was external, and then you had to import the code, and you had, it was all the letters and numbers, and it kind of kept it in that accounting world where it was kind of like that voodoo black magic thing that nobody understands. But now that budget tool is in the actual software, it's a great visual tool. I tell a lot of the new onboarding people, hey, get in there and make a copy and call it Bob's Playground. I mean, unless you name it Bob, that's weird. But anyway, you just make it a playground, and that way you can just play with it, jack with it, make changes over here so you see what the results look like over here, and it kind of takes a lot of that mystery out of finance and budgeting and the things that we hate, except for Scott. And that's the part of it that admin and finance stuff, if we loved that, we'd have done something different with our lives, right? But this takes a lot of that mystery out of it, and it's such a great tool.
Okay, so the next thing is how to budget. So if possible, grab your past financial records and use that as a benchmark to start. If you've never done a budget before, but you've been in business a couple years, go back, grab your P&Ls from the last couple years, and use that as somewhere to start and begin there, and then tweak it from there. Be realistic. Like, the budget can be for dreaming. You want to buy that fancy new excavator with a tilt rotator, you can throw it in your budget, but if it jacks your price way up and you don't think you can get that, you're going to have to pull it out until you're ready. So feel free to play with that, throw things in, dream, but be realistic. And same thing with labor. This is a big one that can get people hung up. when you sit down and do your budget, whenever, let's say January, you're doing it for the upcoming year, and you're figuring your staff needs, make sure you're realistic with that. So don't say, I'm gonna go hire 10 guys and really grow this year, and then it's July, August, September, you hired 1. You've got a lot of hours there that you were planning on that don't really exist. So be careful with that. Like the equipment stuff you can throw in, and if you never buy that excavator, fine, but you're collecting money towards it. But on the labor side, if you plan incorrectly and plan to hire a bunch of people and then that never happens, you're at risk at not recovering all your overhead or making the profit you want to make. Take your time with it. Like just sit down, relax, work on it, don't try to rush through it. Don't stress, and it's an evolving plan. It's not a sit down, bang it out, put it away, and be done with it. You're not going to nail it the first time. It's going to take constant massaging, tweaking, and adjusting. And involve your team. If you're a bigger company and you've got an office admin that pays all the bills, they might have something to add on the overhead discussion. Your crew members might have something to add on how many guys they think you're going to need for the year, things like that. So the bigger the team, involve more people, get more input.
I think to add to that, remember that we are also your team. When it gets to a point that you hit a sticking point on it, I had one of our guys just cornered me outside and he's like, hey, could I, let's just take a look at stuff. So I'm always happy to do that. And if I'm busy, Fred will do it. And there's other people within the company that'll help you dig through it too. The stress is the part that I try and eliminate. I try and simplify it. I try and just be there for you, help you out. And if anybody here is onboarded or spent any time with me, I'm not afraid to talk, right? So hit me up, right? Amen is right. That's right.
All right, and then the last thing is when to budget. So it's like voting in a blue state, early and often. You want to keep your budget constantly evolving. Don't do it once and say, here's my plan for the year, save it, throw it in a file folder, and leave it. Because inevitably, life happens, it's going to change, you have to adjust it. So constantly be monitoring it. At the very least, adjust it quarterly. I'd much more prefer if you're checking it monthly. So quick example, the company I was with before this, long 30-year company, made good money, had a lot of equipment, but had no idea how they did until the accountant did all their work, did the taxes, and said, here's the money you made. I got in there, I said, well, this isn't gonna work, guys, we gotta start budgeting. So we started budgeting, and in the 3 years there, we doubled the company. And it's not just by budgeting, right? But that had a major impact on the company tracking and understanding where money was going, where it was coming from, and growing and doubling in size.
I think that's a good point, Fred. And I say this all the time. When you are doing budgeting and job costing, it will shine a light on other conversations within your company that need to be had. Sometimes it has to do with production and productivity and efficiency. Sometimes it's truck repairs. Sometimes it's fuel costs. I remember when I was onboarding, we identified a huge fuel issue that was most likely theft. There are some things that go on that you won't see until you dive into this financial stuff. So it's super important that you get a handle on it. And I guess the last thing about timing is, I sent out an email to many folks here over the summer because I'd gotten into the system and I had found folks that had signed up with us in late 2021 and still hadn't touched their budget since. And I don't remember any names. I bet there's at least one in this room, right? So make sure that you're reaching out to me because I want to make sure that everything is as accurate as possible. I want you to be profitable and I want your quality of life to go up. It's my mantra.
Are there any budgeting specific questions or stories that someone has that they want to share? And has anybody never done a company budget that's in here? Awesome. Oh, we got one.
You did it for us.
Yeah, that's right.
That's okay.
It's Monday, you just signed up for SynkedUP.
Yeah, all right. So you're going to get your first budget.
If you get so stuck in the middle of it, and it happens, I get people that have, they delay and delay and delay, they push the meetings out, and they're finally like, I haven't had time, I don't know where to start, I don't know what to do, this doesn't make any sense to me. Great, just show up. We'll work through it. I'll spend a little bit of time showing you what needs to be done. We'll start working through everything. If we've got to spill it over into a second call, we'll do it. It's all good. This is not something you need to fear.
So is there anybody here that hadn't really done a budget before, signed up with SynkedUP, did their first budget, and it dramatically has changed your business? We've heard the Friesen story, but is there anybody else that realize the power of a budget and what it can do for you?
No, as somebody that's been in the industry 20 plus years and kind of always guessed at everything, when I got back in, I knew I needed to figure out something to get, my business in the right track. And because it's a longer story, but one of the agreements with my wife when I started was like, you have to run a good business that we can live off of, So I leaned on Josh a little bit for different things and tried others and just couldn't get it. I needed something simple that I could operate in the field and all that stuff. But what the budget really did for me was, in the past I had negotiated on price, and now I can't. I know I can't do it because I look at it and I say, well, I have goals. I have to pay my employees. I have to pay for my materials. So we can't do that,
It's true. We fall into that trap, right? You'll get to a point in the year where the customer says, well, or the potential client says, hey, this looks real good, but I really only had a budget of, 15% less. And work's light. You want to keep the guys busy. You want to make sure you get paid. And so you think, well, I'll do it, because what are those famous last words? We'll make up for it somewhere along the way, right? But you never do. And, then if you go now into SynkedUP and you're like, okay, well, if I knock 5, 10, 15%, whatever the client says, off, I can lower that price, immediately click over to that costing and analysis tab and see exactly where that puts me. And then you're like, oh, well, hell, I've gone from a normal profit to losing 11 or 12%. That's a terrible idea. And then that gives you that confidence to go back to the client and say, I can appreciate that 2 chucks in a truck over here are going to do it for a lot less. I don't know anything about that company, right? We never badmouth the competition. You say, I don't know anything about that company. I don't know what their overheads are. I don't know how they pay their people. What I do know is that my price will allow me to pay my bills, pay my people so they can provide for their families, and then I can provide for you the level of service and quality that I feel like you are expecting based on all these conversations that we've had. And in my experience in the industry, if you have that level of confidence and professionalism, most of the time they'd buy from me anyway, even when I was a little more expensive, because they trust you. I mean, you're being honest with them. And they're gonna go to 2 chucks in a truck and they're not gonna have a cool answer like that, right? They're gonna go, I just wanna earn your business, and it's like, I didn't fill anybody with any confidence. So it's a great point, Greg.
Who did their budget with us and their hourly rate scared them crap out of them? All right, quite a few of you. So who took that new hourly rate, closed their eyes, put it in an estimate, and sent it, and it was signed immediately? You want to share quick on that?
Yeah, I signed up. I guess last year I met Weston in Louisville, and like everybody else, my first question was that wouldn't work for me. I was like, and then I met with Chris and got everything through it, and I thought, golly, there's no way anybody's going to pay this much for anything. And I had it in my budget for like buying another service truck, job trailer, things like that. And I thought I'd have to work for probably 2 or 3 years to do that. And then when I started doing everything, I saw the numbers start coming in. I was like, oh crap, I better do something or I'm gonna have to pay IRS. So I bought all of that stuff this year. And as far as the rest of that question goes, the first project I did I had in my mind my square footage price. I'm sure I'm the only one that does that or was doing that. I knew what I needed to be, and I was like, okay, well, here's that price. And then I ran everything through SynkedUP, and I was like, it's almost like a biblical church testimony, but I was like $4,500 off. So I paid for my SynkedUP for the year right off that first quote. Gave it to the guy, and he said, sounds good, when can you start?
Awesome, awesome.
Round of applause for that, for Jason.
Anybody else have a similar story to that?
Jason is also the one that called Gene one day to file a complaint because he had to deal with paying the IRS money.
Does anybody else have a similar story that the new hourly rate scared the crap out of them, but it's been very good for them?
Yeah, so I've been using SynkedUP for a couple of years, and this year we redid the budget, and I always heard you say estimate for or budget for the company you want. So I'm thinking, well, I want the 4 guys plus my brother and I, so we have 2 full crews, and then we're going to need to add another truck, and we bought the tilt rotator and all this. We've kind of raised our overhead, but then, every month it seemed like I was making less and less and less money, and I'm like, what is happening? I just couldn't get it. And then Nick Conley's in my peer group. He's like, I know what's happening. Like, you never hired those 4 guys that are in your budget, so you're not recouping those hours and you're losing money. And so I met with Chris. He's like, you have to hire those 3 guys to lower your overhead or lower your hourly costs. Even though, and it seems counterintuitive because you're hiring people to lower your cost per hour, but I was charging, the budget said, with the 4 guys in it, said I needed to charge $85 an hour, so I was charging $100, thinking I'll be good because I knew I could sell at $100. And then we took those guys out, and it brought my hourly rate to $165, which is what I should have been charging for my brother and I with the overhead and costs we had. So all this time we've been up until now, which I recently changed it, but that was like a huge eye-opener, and I just didn't catch it. And I always intended to hire those people, and we just never found them. So I'm selling all this work, losing that money. So it was a huge eye-opener, and I'm glad we caught it now, and I think it's going to be a huge change as we go forward, obviously. But it was just something I got caught up on, and Chris was saying, like, a lot of people don't put that together, that hiring more people is going to bring your hourly rate down, not like raise your costs. Like, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing, Josh.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, for sure. Josh, and
So,
truly, what?
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, truly, thank you for sharing that. And that is a critical piece that I've seen a lot of here recently, is that deal with hours. The labor hours that you have in your budget are such a critical part of the way that the math works in SynkedUP, because you're dividing those labor hours in your budget into your overhead. So in Josh's case, he didn't hire those guys, so those labor hours were never being performed, so that overhead recovery was never happening. And that's what causes that bleeding, when you have something that goes on and you don't catch it. And that's both an example of why it's a great thing to have a tool at your disposal that shows you that stuff. It's also a good indicator of why it's a good idea. Hey, get in the habit, when your books close every month, get in and just compare it against your budget and see how you're tracking. If you need to tweak it a little bit, great. Or you may just need to watch it for the next month and make sure you get things in line. So thanks again, buddy.
Thanks. And this is also why we have a role that seems like you technically look at a balance sheet and don't need that role. This is why we have Chris in the house, is to help you pinpoint those kinds of issues and actually make you successful, because the math is one portion of it. We got all the real life stuff of the production and everything like that as well. So
How often should we be revisiting and looking at our budget to change it? And what are some of the key indicators that we need to change it?
Good question. So I would recommend monthly, at the very least quarterly, but if you can do monthly, it's going to be better. And you want to compare that to hours worked, material expenses, and your overhead, and see how you're tracking to what you planned. And feel free to adjust it when it's off. Like, if you have a month and things go crazy or something happens and it's totally different, adjust your budget. Like, that is not something to feel bad about. Like, that's why it's there. Is something happened, make that change, your pricing goes up or down a little bit, and then you're good going forward. Like, never be embarrassed or feel guilty that you're changing your budget. It's never meant to be a one-time set it and forget it thing. It's constantly evolving. The other thing is, anytime you make a major purchase or a personnel change, whether it's a hire or a fire, that would be another thing that would trigger a budget review.
the way to think about it is, let's say you put 25 grand for the year in for fuel in your budget. Then you never look at it again. And what happened last summer, I think it was last summer, right? Where fuel spiked like crazy, and suddenly you were spending way more on fuel than you had budgeted for. And what that meant is every quote you're sending out the door is out of date. So that's kind of the point, is every time you spend money or hire or fire or impact your financial structure in your business and don't update your budget, the next proposal you send out is out of date. And you could be charging too much or too little. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's. I mean, if everything is working off the budget, that is really important, because I didn't realize just hiring or firing one guy could impact your
Dramatically
budget.
change it.
So, all right.
Yeah,
You're gonna
it
be
can
hearing from
impact
me a
you
lot.
radically.
Good. Job security, Weston.
Here's the other thing, though. If you lose a foreman and hire another one in 2 weeks, it's not really worth switching it. You're still maintaining that role. It's more of like,
Equipment and stuff.
yes.
Okay, let's take a quick 10-minute break. We'll come back in, we'll wrap up the day, a couple more segments on estimating in mobile app, a couple surprises potentially, and then we'll go from there.
Thank
All
you.
right, 10 minutes, right back here.
Thanks, guys.